Hey guys! Today's episode is sponsored by Melissa Flick's Author Services. Just starting out or well established, Melissa's Author Services offers both book management and virtual authors assistance at reasonable prices. We're talking book management, marketing, content scheduling on social networks, author account management, calendar organization, administrative tasks, creating and promoting promotional planning. It's all there. And I got to say, working with Melissa is one of my best parts of the day. She's creative, fun, organized, and a shark when she needs to be. Go to melissaflicks.com. That's melissaflicks.com. Click contact, tell her what you need, and put too many words in the subject line. Do it and make your life easier and have more time to write. All right, let's do the show. What's up, guys? This is Jamie Bedingfield, and you're listening to Too Many Words, my podcast. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. It is the place for the creative and the more than slightly odd. How's it going? On today's show, I have Bob Proehl. He is author of 100,000 Worlds, and it is an incredibly crafted and written story following very deep and complex characters on a con tour. So definitely go look up Bob, check it out. It was great talking to him, cool dude, and great story. So definitely tune in for that. And I'm going to get a little business out of the way, if you don't mind. And as some of you already know, I have co-written a high fantasy novel with Rebecca Clark, and we have entered it in the Geek and Sundry contest through Inkshares. Geek and Sundry picked the top 3, published them, shopped them around to other media, great coverage, distributing to bookstores, hardback. It's all there, and I want it bad, and so does Rebecca. So if you could go to inkshares.com, that is inkshares.com, and look up The Shadow Bearers. That is our book. Pre-order it. Tell your friends. Pre-ordering is how we win. So help spread the word and, to tug on some heartstrings. Help us get closer to our dreams, our writer aspirations. So thank you in advance, and a big thank you to everybody who has already pre-ordered. It is awesome. We're getting more each day. Chapter 3 just was posted, and it introduces some characters I'm really excited about sharing. Magical creatures called lockets. And there is a river dragon, and there is some just very complicated magic-based characters. Years of playing fantasy RPGs has really helped lead me to this moment. And, Rebecca's love for fantasy, we love the world, and we're really happy to be creating it, and writing it together has been so much fun. And next week, you will be able to listen to her and I get into all sorts of details about the project. So definitely tune in for that. And go to inkshares.com and order The Shadow Bearers, and tell your friends. How is everybody doing today? What are you doing? Are you jogging? I would listen to music. If you're jogging, I wouldn't listen to me ramble. Come back to me later and put on some Beyonce. But if you're driving, watch out. If you have your right blinker on and you're not making a right-hand turn, get ready to get beeped at. I know I always do. I'm doing okay. I'm a little flustered, and I'm not sleeping well, and my mind is just an ever-present buzzing machine of ideas and schemes and plans and aspirations, and I'm exhausting myself, but I'm also having a lot of fun. But I have been super shuffling and busy and crazy, so I did not get to any questions. I did not read my email, and so I don't have the 2 questions that I usually have to answer. So I apologize, and I'll get to it. The contest has been very time-consuming. Great, but very time-consuming. I have some short stories that just went out, one of which will be published October 13th in Magic Unveiled, which is a magical realism anthology by Creative Alchemy Inc. So definitely look for that. And I am working on a 5-book dystopian series. And I'm in the trenches right now, and kind of, working to a particular date that's pretty aggressive, but, it's time to put my money where my mouth is, or, put my words and follow through behind my pitch that I pulled off. So wish me luck and be patient. I will get to those. I will. And keep sending them. I love to hear your wacky stories and problems and writing issues. I understand being a moody writer, that's for sure. And currently, I'm having to silence that inner critic a lot because it's just counterproductive. I need to be heads down. I need to be writing. I need to be thinking about what's best for the story that I'm working on. And I can't worry about all this other noise. And it's hard. Music helps. And, oh, well, that is one thing. I did get tweeted at, and I am better at staying up on Twitter than email. Something about email. It's like, it's like opening a mailbox because that's what it is. And it's just blah. Anyway, no, like I said, I'll get to it. Even though it's overwhelming at times, especially that account. And, and again, yes, the Civil War episode is marked as spoilers. So if you didn't catch that, it's well marked. I'm sorry that you were waiting to buy it, and I'm sorry that I spoiled it, but it was heavily marked. I tried my best ever since the Walking Dead incident to mark spoilers. So my apologies, Twitter, and everybody involved. Summer is winding down. This is the last week before my kids go back to school. And my son's birthday is September 4th. So it falls on, it always falls on Labor Day weekend right before school starts. This is a crazy time. Fall is just fall for parents. I mean, I think I'm not trying to exclude not parents. It's all good there. But I got to say, kids starting school is just crazy. And it's going to be intense. It's an intense time. And it's weird because, I have to spend a fair amount of time isolated and writing. But like when the house is a mess and all this stuff needs to get done, and all this, it's like I feel selfish being on my office futon creating magical creatures. I mean, it's disorienting to, taking time away. It's work. It's my work. It's what I do. But it's just been a big adjustment. And it's weird. And sometimes I feel like just, a selfish hermit. Yep. I do. Sometimes I feel like a selfish hermit. What are you going to do, I guess? And I'm rambling on and on because that's also what I do. And I think that it is time to go to my talk with Bob, hear about his journey creating the book, and where, some cool things along the way. Enjoy, because it's a good one. Hey, Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I've been looking forward to it. I originally found out about you. Seth Fishman was tweeting about your release, 100,000 Worlds, and I picked it up and I started reading it. I'm like, I have to have him on the show. This book is awesome.
Oh, great. Seth has been very busy spreading the word about the book this summer.
That's good. Well, so first off, congratulations on your recent release.
Thank you.
It must be great to have it out there.
It is, yeah. It's I just sort of finished touring for it. I've got one more or two more things this week, but the last month I've been basically traveling and getting the word out there on that. And it's nice to be home, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great month.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd imagine it's fun getting the word out there and sharing it with everybody because books take a while.
We scheduled. I was at San Diego Comic-Con for like 4 or 5 days, sort of at the end of that month of traveling. So that was it was both a good way to cap things off and also completely exhausting at the end of a couple weeks of traveling.
Well, yeah. So I saw that you were there. Was that your first time there as a creator?
It was my first time there. Period. I mean, I've been to a bunch of other cons, but I've never made it out to San Diego before then.
That must have been a pretty cool experience then.
It was great. Everybody said, I was like, oh, it's about the same number of people as New York City Comic Con, which I go to pretty regularly. And everybody said, no, it's a completely different thing. And I didn't quite believe them or understand them. And everybody said, like, well, I can't explain it to you. You have to just do it, and then you'll understand what we're talking about. And it is a completely different type of event from any of the other cons. Just the scale of it is really daunting.
That's what I've heard. I've never been to that one either, but yeah, it seems like a pretty epic one.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad I went. I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would go again. I think certainly if I were going to like travel really far for a convention, I'm not sure that San Diego would be the one that I would go back to.
Why is that? Just curious.
I think it's because of the scale of it. You don't get the sort of contact time that you sometimes do at smaller conventions. I was at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle just before the book came out, and that was like this perfect balance of size and who was there and how much people were just kind of hanging out.
Okay, yeah, that's my con. I live in Seattle.
Yeah, that's a great convention. That's maybe my favorite of the ones that I've been to this year. But especially as someone who goes to these things as a big comic book fan, that's the one where you get to just like kind of walk up to people and chat them up in a way that San Diego doesn't really allow for.
Were you able to kind of enjoy any of the con as a fan, or were you pretty much working the whole time?
Oh, I had a couple days to just sort of walk the floor. The thing with San Diego is, I think one of the ways to do it is to plan way ahead and pick the lines that you're going to stand a long time in. And I didn't really get to do that. So it was just kind of walking around and sightseeing and spending more money than I intended. That kind
of. So, to take you to the book, I was wondering, like, what led you to following characters through Contour?
Well, I mean, partly it was just being a big fan for a long time and coming to conventions as an adult. I mean, I went to what were called cons when I was a kid, but they were little, and they were really just like dudes with back issues of comics selling them in the concourse of a mall. And I didn't really have an experience with fandom so much, like a group experience with fandom, until I was an adult. And I'm coming to that and coming to New York City Comic Con as an adult and seeing what a great environment that can be in a lot of ways got me interested in the possibility of telling a story there. And then around the same time, I was a new step-parent. My stepson was 8 at the time that I was starting the book, and seeing how he interacted with stories, and particularly like fantastic stories, it made me really want to see those two things sort of together, to see what a kid in an environment like that might look like as far as a novel.
Well, I guess
it wasn't until a couple of years later that I actually took him to one, because I was worried that he would get squished.
Well, one of my favorite parts about the book is how you learn about Anomaly through the stories that Val tells Alex. That was a really cool component for me. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean that got me, when I decided that was something I wanted to do. The book that I immediately went back to and reread was The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood.
Yes.
And there's this amazing thing in there. If for some reason your listeners haven't read it, they should just go on and read it and not listen to me talk about it. But where two of the characters, you're getting a lot of the story through this made-up story that two of the characters are collaborating on, and that way that like storytelling warps to biography was really interesting to me. And I think when I first started out doing this thing where Val the mother was telling her son basically like episode recaps of her old television show, it was done pretty straight. And then the more I wrote it, the more I realized that she was sort of not being not being honest with him about these made up stories, that she was changing things slightly and then sometimes not so slightly, so that she could use these as a way to talk about her history and about his history.
Well, and I have 2 kids, and I got to say the mother and son relationship in the book, I really really enjoy how you depicted it. It's very it's just very real.
Thanks. I had I had a kid in the house at the time, so a lot of that is it's just based on watching how he and my wife interacted, and then a lot of it was coming into being a parent at that time, and trying to figure out a lot of balance points, and like what I was willing to change and what I was willing to give up. I think particularly if you're a parent who's involved in a sort of non-traditional job, there's a fear of selfishness.
Definitely.
That persists even now. I have my stepson now is 13, and I have a daughter who's just over a year.
Oh wow!
And like, all the days that I have to take off for writing, I'm hyper aware of the fact that I'm taking that time away from them. And I think it's just something I really wanted to look at how complicated parenting is, and how some of it like sometimes you think awful things, and it's okay. It's part of the project.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also really interested in how savvy kids are, how emotionally savvy kids can be, not necessarily about their own feelings, but about
how they see the world.
Yeah, how they see the world, and like the ways in which our kids are protective of us at the same time that we think that we're being protective of them. The ways that they keep some information back because they're taking care of us. So I really, with Val and Alex, wanted to sort of present both sides of that.
Well, I think you did a really good job there. I mean, that Alex stood out to me because, there's, so many times when there is a kid character in, more of an adult story, it's often, he just really pops as like a real live child. And like you said, like his view on the world and how he takes it all in, I couldn't help but think of my own son when I was reading some of it.
Yeah, I think very often when people write kids, they write them as sort of proto-adults,
mm-hmm.
and I don't think that that's accurate. Like we see kid thinking portrayed as like adult thinking that just isn't working quite right or isn't quite developed, and it's not. It's like an entirely different mechanism, and there are values to those skills. There are things that there are ways that a kid thinks that you don't necessarily grow out of them. You give them up. You change them in for different sort of modes of cognition. And I think sometimes the out for a writer is to do the like magically precocious child.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure with Alex that wasn't what I was doing. I was really wary of making sure that he didn't sort of know things that a 9-year-old couldn't or wouldn't know, or that he couldn't access certain modes of thinking that a 9-year-old wouldn't.
Totally.
Actually, when we were getting ready to do the audiobook, they sent me a couple of voice actors, and one of them was someone who had done the audiobook of a novel that I won't mention the title of, but has a precocious magical child protagonist. And I was immediately like, no, we can't. We can't do that, because I had this specific book in mind as something to avoid.
Yes.
Alex's character.
Well, and just, paying attention to my own kids, there's so often that they are able to just see things in a way that adults can't see because of, just experience and, the natural, jadedness that happens. And then, sometimes my kids surprise me because they'll just cut through it all and be like, oh, well, this is why. And it's like, oh, you guys are so deep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was another sort of starting point for this book was like I said, giving my stepson these stories that were really important to me as a kid. Giving him comic books or like watching the original Superman with him and just seeing how he reacted. And as a fan of a certain age, you forget the ways that you connected with those stories to begin with. And to see him pick up on things that I had sort of forgotten were there in some of these things was really, really amazing.
Totally. It's funny that you mentioned that because I was reading Harry Potter to my son. Mm-hmm. And, we're about halfway through and he says, why doesn't Harry talk very much? A lot of people talk, but he doesn't talk very much. And I was like, you know what? I never noticed that before.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I never thought of that.
No, me neither. No, especially in the first one. He doesn't say very much at all. And it's nothing, I never picked up on that before. Now it's like, when somebody points something out to you, you can't not notice it.
Yeah, but it makes a lot of sense for a character and a kid in the position that he's in, that he would be more observing than commenting.
Definitely.
Yeah. Huh.
But yeah, so I finished 100,000 Worlds last night, and there really isn't much out there like it. It's really unique. I really, really like it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was tough in that way. A lot of once the book sells, you've got to figure out how to sort of market it to people, and those discussions have been weird and ways. Like, who are we selling this to? And one of the weird but really great results of that is before the book came out, I was getting sent to comic book conventions to promote it, and I would end up on panels with fantasy and sci-fi writers because that's largely who are at conventions,
right.
The literary side of things. And I would always be the guy who's up there saying like, well, there's like no dragons or robots in my book. That's what you're here for. But it's fun, and it's fun to be on a panel and be the person that there's no expectations for.
Well, all the different characters and fictional worlds that you created within this one book, it strikes me as a lot of fun.
I would like to write. It meant I didn't get stuck that often. If the actual like prose writing, the hard work of it wasn't working that day, I could just say like, okay, well, I'm gonna come up with like fake episodes for this show, or I'm gonna come up with plot synopses for this comic book, or a couple more characters, and I have like such extensive notes for this book that never got used, because very often that's how I would procrastinate. Would be like, oh, I'll just do this other thing, and I'm sure it'll become totally useful later.
Well, I do like the saying, no written word is ever wasted, but you can really the fact that you say you have a lot of notes, it comes through because everything like every character, all the fictional stories that you've created within it all of it comes across as very deep.
Thank you. It started off as a very different book in a lot of ways, and it was going to be sort of more broad and anthropological, more like looking at fandom as a subculture, and if the description doesn't already bore you, that sort of indicates why I didn't end up writing that book. It changed very quickly once I started telling the story of Val and Alex, that became really the heart of the book almost immediately, and a lot of this other stuff sort of fell by the wayside. But like I said, it's still just fun to do that kind of stuff and fit those pieces together. And um, it's the book is a little bit fan fiction. It's a little bit X-Files / fiction in a certain way.
It's funny that you mention X-Files, because so Val kept making me think of Scully, and I was wondering if she was in your mind at all when you created her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any point in trying to hide that fact. Um, that character was such a sort of game change character for sci-fi and gender, and X-Files was like so dear to me growing up, and came along at that point where like there wasn't that much weird stuff out there, and I was exactly at the right age where I needed stuff that was really weird, and comics certainly offered that. I was watching X-Files at the same time that I was starting to read like Vertigo comics, which were really, really bizarre at the time. And I think it's so important for kids who are a little different or a little weird to see something and say like, oh, it's not just me. Like other people are really strange too. And, growing up like in the suburbs, you maybe don't see that. So yeah, that show was really, really important to me growing up, and as part of the constellation of fandom that I subscribe to.
It was that for me too, because like you said, like especially like TV then, when X-Files was out and new, there wasn't a lot out there for the weird to grab, to put it that way. And I remember just being able to just relate to it so much, and it's it played with different thoughts that I had, and it's cool now. It's just so much more common for all these different shows and books, and kind of there's a lot more out there now. But
yeah, and I mean, for a show to allow itself to be weird and scary and funny and sad, like all of that was kind of new, or seemed new to me. I mean, I'm sure you could go back and find other examples, but it clicked for me like immediately as a kid. And I also think, like I said, Scully is such an amazing character as far as like women in genre fiction, and really opened up a lot of what you could do as far as a female character in science fiction.
definitely. Well, she did stand out, as far as, she's so strong and, on top of her stuff. And it was, like there's a lot more strong females in media today than there was when she hit the scene.
Right. And it's interesting to me now, like seeing people who are going back and looking at Buffy, for example, for like the first time, and not being as impressed as as I might feel they should be. And I think it's that same kind of thing where it might be easy to forget that like there wasn't other stuff like that.
Totally.
And that was an important, like it's sort of an important artifact of feminism in genre.
Big time.
Even if its politics not all of its politics hold up for a modern audience, and it's like it's actually kind of great that a young audience today can look at that and be like, I guess that's fine, but like here are the mistakes it's making, and that kind of speaks to the fact that things continue to progress and move in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. I spent a good part of my youth wishing that I was Buffy. So the cosplayers in the book, I love it. I think it's just so neat how you put that together, and the dialogue there is just, it's top notch. What
Can you like what led you to kind of creating those characters and bringing them into the story the way you did?
Oh, I mean, that was just like that was just making a decision that I would really like to have a Greek chorus of women in superhero costumes, commenting on issues of feminism and representation in genre materials. Like that was very much how that started. That didn't start from character. That's one of those few things where like the idea comes first, like the sort of more political idea comes first,
Okay.
and then you work back to it. So yeah, that was, and then it just became really fun to write. And I think, one of the things about writing a book that is about fandom and writing it for a general audience is there are things that you need to sort of step out and explain, and to try to do that without being pedantic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought it was really important that the term bridging get introduced to a more general audience, because it comes up heavily in genre stuff, but it's something that's in a lot of narrative. So how do you do that? How do you get that across in a fun way? How do you talk about the state of the comic book industry or the films that come out of that, without sounding like you're lecturing? And one way to do that is to do a chorus.
Yeah. Well, no, I loved it. And I mean, I was enjoying the book right from the get-go, but when I got to them, I was just like, wow, I am just 100% in. This is awesome. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, it was kind of an out of the blue idea that, it was pretty central to that stayed between both versions of the book, when it was a more like, let's look at this subculture, and then switching into like, no, let's actually tell a story rather than just do a setting. They those characters, stuck around.
Well, I'm glad they did. So, was there any one particular part of the story or character that came to you first?
This story actually started from its beginning. I immediately, the first part was really that first night of them, the first day and night of Val and Alex on the road, and then sort of in the hotel room, and seeing how they were starting out on this trip, and seeing like reticence to tell Alex everything, and see with Alex this awareness that something was going on that he didn't know. It's always compelling, as a writer to write around a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I've sort of learned as I get older as a writer is that the audience can be in on that secret. For a long time, I thought you had to like hold all of your narrative parts really close to the chest, and then there's going to be like this big reveal moment where the reader finds out what's going on, and that moment is often not as dramatic as you expect it to be when you're writing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes what can be more compelling is to give the reader the information and then watch how that information moves between the characters. And that can generate more drama and more consistent drama and more like interesting character moments than, waiting for this moment like at the end of Act 2 where somebody is like, and here's what we've been keeping from you, and you expect everybody to gasp, and nobody actually gasps.
So
it started very much at the beginning, and then the chapter in Greenpoint where they meet the Idea Man, that was a really early chapter, but had to be sort of moved to later for the sake of momentum.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny how your parts do need to get moved around once you get further in. I mean, I find that what I discovered that I do is that I leave out the beginning entirely when I start, and I start somewhere, after kind of the like right as like that first plot point is starting, and then I have to go back and start it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad way to go. I think it's very easy to overestimate how much backstory an audience needs or wants. And I often end up, and it didn't so much happen with this one, but writing a lot of stuff at the beginning that gets cut, and then you realize that, oh, actually this book starts 20 pages into what I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe that information, maybe the stuff you've already written is important to the reader, or maybe it's just important that the writer knows it, and that deepens the characters a little bit, or gives the writer a better map of where the story's going to go from there.
Well, one thing I really like about the Gail character is how you really get a sense from her about just the grind of creating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always really interested in economics and in work, and I think it's something that gets left out of books too often, like how people actually pay their rent. And so one of the things that I was really interested in with this story is like, what does it mean? What does it look like to do this for a living, to write or draw comic books for a living? Because it's it's a kind of form of middle class employment.
Mm-hmm.
People are not fantastically rich, and we're at this weird moment in the sort of economics of culture where there's a lot of there are like middle class musicians, and there are more so than there are like huge rock stars, and there is like a working middle class of writers, and so what does that look like as far as day to day? And then of course the thing with Gail is that she's kind of an insider outsider. She's working in this industry and she's a fan of comics, but she's also female, and it's still like that puts you a little to the fringe.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was a great character to be able to describe and critique at the same time. Whereas Brett, who's the comic book artist, who's a straight white male, kind of floats through this culture without thinking about it as much as maybe he ought to.
Totally. Well, is there a character in the story that you would say that you relate most to?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, my voice cracked there. Is there a character that you relate most to in the story?
I mean, it's all of them in different ways, and I think when you sit down to write, you sort of subconsciously like parse all your anxieties out to different characters.
I'm familiar with that.
You're going to have all the concerns I have about parenting, and you're going to take like my neuroses about never breaking into professionally, and then you're going to have like the worrying about being a hack, and then everybody gets a little something.
Nice. Yep.
And sometimes, the hardest characters are the ones where it takes you the longest to find what it is that you don't like about yourself that you put in them. Andrew, the ex-husband character, in early drafts, he was very, very two-dimensional, and I was okay with that. But my editor was not, and she really pushed me to develop that character and find some point of sympathy with him. And it was when I sort of got at this idea that he was sort of came from a more traditional masculine concept of parenting, that I was worried that I was sort of bringing to the table myself. And then like a lot of stuff started to click for him, and he became a character that I could actually write. But it took a while. He was maybe the last one.
Interesting.
To come together for me.
So, and I read that you, I believe in the acknowledgement part of your book that you drafted 100,000 Worlds at an artist residency.
Yep. It's the Saltonstall residency, the Saltonstall Foundation and Colony for the Arts, which is it's in upstate New York, and it's a free residency. I'm on their board now, so I'm advertising at the moment. So basically, I was there for a month, and it was myself and like each group has a fiction writer, a poet, a photographer, and 2 visual artists.
How cool!
And you're just kind of in the woods for a month. And at the time, luckily for me, they were having problems with their internet, so there was really not there's not much of anything to do but do the work.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was great. So I was working 15-hour days on this book for a month.
That's awesome.
It really changes the shape of how you write, and it also prepared me for a couple months later. I left my full-time job to basically rewrite this book, and I think one thing that if you're when you're starting out and you're writing sort of in your spare time, when you're writing after work or late at night, there's always this question of like, well, I don't know that I could do this or sustain this from 9 to 5. So that was that residency time was great as far as job training, or like learning the sort of endurance aspects of writing.
Yeah, showing you that you can do it, that you can fully. Yeah. No, that's a big jump. I made that jump this past fall, writing full time, going from writing in my spare time to writing full time, and it's a big difference. I discovered that I needed to find other hobbies to wind down with at night.
Yeah, it's a weird. I mean, this is kind of what I was hinting at about like being a comic book writer. Like, it's a weird job to have. It is a functionally weird thing to do with your time. And when I feel like I've been touring so much that I've kind of forgotten what it's like to to be back at work. But your partner comes home at the end of the day and they have like an active day, and they're like, oh well, this is going on at the office, and my wife would say like, well, what did you do today? And I'd be like, I wrote about a riot in Warsaw at the end of the 19th century. This kid got shot in the face and like through this whole thing. And yeah, it's just a weird way to make a living.
It is, and it's very, you have to really you have to do it to really understand it, but it is strange. I mean, there are some days where it's like, everything else is just on hold, and I'm, in my corner in my office scribbling in my notebook, and then, the day is through and it's like, oh, well, I made up a lot of great stuff, but my house is a mess.
Yeah, I've tried to get in the habit of like at least the half an hour or so before I pick up my wife and my kids of like doing something practical around the house, so that I sort of re-enter the real world for a little bit.
Yep. I found that to be
something I can point to when they come home. Because, see, I did dishes.
Yep. No, it is. It can be disorienting, but it's a great gig. I love it.
Yeah. No, it just makes things really strange in a lot of ways.
Definitely. And it can be strange to explain it too, what you do when you're having a conversation with somebody that isn't familiar.
Yeah, and I'm being introduced now to this weird fact that and somebody had a better quote than what I'm going to say, is like, writing is a full-time job and being a writer can be another full-time job. So like this past month and really about a month before the book came out, my job wasn't writing, it was being a writer. It was like doing the tour and doing interviews and writing essays that are about the stuff that the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all great and it's weird, and but it takes you away from the work. And so now I'm like, all these muscles in my brain feel a little atrophied, and sort of trying to get back into my good habits, such as they were.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a balance, is, the actually creating and then, sharing your work, putting the word out there, making connections.
Yeah.
So I have, pieced together that you yourself are a comic book fan. What are some of your favorites? Do you have ones that you can point to as ones that you are just crazy about right now? Ones that really inspired you early on? Anything like that?
I mean, early on, I started out as a superhero comics reader, and sort of the bigs, reading Batman and Superman, and then, like I was saying, when I sort of hit my early teens, I fell into the really weird stuff that was Vertigo comics in the '90s, and that's like Neil Gaiman's Sandman,
Mm-hmm.
some of which I still really love, some of which I sort of moved away from, and again, it was so weird and so like deeply psychologically weird, that and I didn't realize that you could do that kind of thing in literature. It also, I think, comics helped introduce me to the idea of writing as a job. In a lot of ways, like I started to see that there were people that were doing this, who weren't necessarily like Stephen King and John Grisham and Danielle Steele, who were like middle class, writers. And so yeah, those were really big as when I was a kid. Now there's just so much good stuff out there now, that I could spend all of my time reading books, and some weeks I do. So like Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples is amazing.
That's one of my favorites.
Oh my goodness! I just picked up the volume 6, and it just made me cry. And I can't say why because it'll give away a major plot point. Bitch Planet by Kelly Sue DeConnick is like the smartest thing I've ever seen in comics. It's just like, you see someone take on a project that's explicitly political like that, and then you go in with all your critical apparatuses, and you're like looking to poke holes in it, and like, wow, no, this is just drum tight and also lots of fun, and just damn. So there are those, and then, there's great stuff going on sort of on the fringes of superhero comics. Obviously, like Ms. Marvel by G. Willow Wilson is just consistently fantastic.
It's true.
And there's a series, Squirrel Girl is great, and like I can't wait for my daughter to be of an age where we can read Squirrel Girl together. I'm like, I've got like a slowly growing stack of them. And same thing with Ms. Marvel, and yeah, there's just like there's so much good stuff right now.
There is. I just started Monstrous.
Oh yes, that is excellent.
I was hearing so much about it. It was like one of those things. It's like, yo, you haven't read that yet. What are you doing? And I finally, I was getting work added to my sleeve last Friday, and the tattoo artist was talking to me about it. I was like, okay, I can't take it. I got to start reading it. And wow, it's awesome.
The only difficult part with these is that so many of these series are just starting out, and then they just can't come out fast enough for me.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, if I feel like you can walk into any comic book store, and Image, which is where a lot of really good stuff is going on right now.
It's true.
All of those first trades are $10, and like, even if it's stuff that doesn't ultimately like work great for me or stuff that I want to pursue, it's such a low buy-in cost, and it's a good chance to take, and any good comic book store will be able to sort of guide you towards something that'll really work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, well, when I was a kid, my dad owned a card and comic shop, and
cool.
And I would spend a lot of time just kind of sitting in the aisles and wishing I was a superhero. So one more question: if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I think I would have super speed. I think that's just growing up reading a lot of Hollywood Flash comics, and partly it's just that feeling that partly it's from the very practical need to to do things fast, and partly it's just having been traveling for the last month, like being on planes and buses is so generally unpleasant. But it would be awesome if I could just like be in Portland, Oregon right now.
Totally. I think that's part of, I think I'd go with teleporting. And it's, yeah, I could just, let's just teleport over to Hawaii for a bit.
Yeah. I think teleportation is so linked with the fly in my head that I'm a little wary of taking that on as a superpower.
Yeah, it does seem to come at a cost.
Yeah, but nothing could possibly go wrong with super speed, so I think I'm safe there.
Well, so Bob, could you tell everybody where they can find you?
I have a website that has, I mean, I don't have many events coming up, but that's bobproehl.com. I'm on Twitter at Bob Proehl. I'm on Instagram, although not as often as maybe I ought to be. Also at Bob Proehl, but those are the places to find me. Twitter is probably the one where I'm around most.
Twitter is most fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, it took me a while to learn. When we got ready to start marketing the book, the marketing team at Viking was like, "You need to be on there half an hour a day." They don't actually sound like that, and I was. It was like a part of my work day, and now I'm hooked.
Mm-hmm.
I also, because I came on late, you get to pick sort of what Twitter you want to be part of and what you want that little world to look like for you. And so, especially as regards to fandom, I've been able to be really selective and sort of weed out a lot of the noise that often accompanies
social media,
yeah. and fandom in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I find it organizing using the lists really helped me, because then I can just, if I just want to plug into, if I want to avoid any Walking Dead spoilers, I don't click on my TV list. I go somewhere else.
Yeah, I need to up my game.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a wide world. I first got on, Twitter for the same reason 6 years ago, because I was putting out a book and I needed to reach out, and yeah, so there's a lot there. It's Snapchat that I need to figure out. I got my 17-year-old nephew to kind of help me get started, but
yeah, I'm glad nobody's asked me to wade into that.
Yeah,
just like that seems like one generation younger than me, so
it feels that when I use it too. I'm like, I don't feel like the target audience here.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And that wraps up today's show, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. And a big thanks to Bob for coming on. And yeah, so follow me on Twitter at @meBettingfield, or the show at Too Many Words Pod. Follow the Facebook page, Too Many Words Pod, and I'm on there too. I'm easy to find. And go to inkshares.com, pre-order The Shadow Bears. You can also read my column in the Matters of Kindness on femininecollective.com. So go there and hear my vulnerable side. You're thinking, I know. I hear it all the time. But anyway, for a different side of it, more personal, go check it out. My site, of course, jamiebettingfield.com. And until next time.